All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here at the NUS Museum today for this installment of Grounded Conversations titled Crossing the Seas. My name is Yetu. I'm a programmer here at the NUS Museum. And we're honored to have with us here Fajrina Razak, who is a visual artist, cultural worker, curator, and educator. Fajrina's books take on an analysis approach practice using traditional materials and contemporary mediums as conduits for the archival of knowledge and, by extension, forming inquiries on historical references related to Nusantara and Southeast Asia. Working primarily with batik, her books are also translated across mediums such as image making, installation, and text-based art. In 2023, she was the artist in residence of Rimbundahan, Malaysia, and Metropolitan Museum of Manila, Philippines. In today's conversation, we'll delve into new works developed during Fajrina's residency in the Philippines, supported by the National Arts Council, Singapore. Today's conversation draws upon Fajrina's experiences and critical inquiries throughout her residency and how the textile traditions, living archives of healing, and ethno-ecological practices she encountered in the Philippines intersect with her batik-making practice. This installment of Grounded Conversations is held in conjunction with the ongoing prep room exhibition titled The Hull and the Rig that is just above us at the concourse level. The exhibition is a display of boat models incepted in the 1970s that have traveled through different cultural institutions. The prep room investigates the object biographies of these boat models and the intimate stories around maritime cultures, island heritage, and the macro and individual relationships to the sea. Just to note, the comments and sentiments expressed during the following conversation do not reflect the positions of the organizations Siddharta and Fajrina are affiliated to and are ultimately words of their own. Without further ado, I'll hand over the time to our curatorial lead, Siddharta Perez, to start this Grounded Conversations. Sit, please.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this Saturday. The conversation that we're having is in conjunction, I guess, in a way, a reflection of the different places and the practices that Fajrina encountered and inspired her during her residency that is due to, what is that, NAC, to mention it, National Arts Council International Residency in collaboration with the Metropolitan Museum of Manila in the Philippines. So Fajrina has been there from October to December of last year, and it's really good to welcome you back here again. It's the first time that we had a conversation here in the NUS Museum with Fajrina. It was within the capacity of looking at archival work and processes when she was the president, when she served the term as president of APAT, Angkatan Pelukis and Aneka Daya, that was established in 1962. So she kept this in her studio. But that also somehow segues, of course, into looking at how certain archival fields and domains have influence and discursively looked at artistic practices, especially one of Fajrina's, wherein certain kind of regionality, traditional, what we call traditional material and craft making influence contemporary practices. Like how do these certain modes of historicity, placemaking, and also connections, right, come through, get expressed in the work that we do, not just as artists, but as cultural laborers. And with this talk, Fajrina would be showing us beautiful snippets of her time in the Philippines. So it wasn't just in Manila. It was through Iloilo, Antique, Quezon, Batangas, and Tagaytay. And this is, I guess, we hope to, I guess, in a way, make public our conversations around what we know of certain places and the connections wherein we can constitute, or if you're thinking through the idea, it's called the idea of Nusantara. So this would be something that we'd talk about through your presentation. So Fajrina.
Okay, thank you so much, Sid. Before I begin with my presentation slide, I would just like to say thank you to you and NUS Museum and also to Patrick Flores, because prior to the residency, I consulted with Sid and Patrick Flores, just to have an idea where I should go, who I should meet prior to reaching, embarking on the residency. So that was really helpful and also productive, very productive, and also intense in some ways. Once I was there in 2 months, there's so many things to do. Every day was different. And also there's a lot of traveling around. It's not just in Manila, but outside of Manila. The commute is also, in some ways, shape that residency as well, and also inform the thought processes into the work that I did over there. So, yeah.
Maybe as a context too, I want to bring forward the proposal that you made for this residency. You wanted to research on traditional healing practices in folk rituals and ethnobotanical ecological links to these practices. So yeah, was that something then that you...
Yeah, so in 2023, it is a significant time for me and also a sabbatical sort of. So throughout 2023, I did 2 residencies. So one in Rimbundahan, about 6 weeks. And then I came back to Singapore for 2 months, and then I went back again to do a bit of sojourn in some ways. So that was another 2 months, came back to Singapore for 2 months, and then went to Manila for 2 months. So that was a bit of, eye-opening time for me, and so that, add on to the residency experience. So why sojourn is also an important time for artists to, sit down and, not sit down, but really move around and experience new things. Because in Singapore, you don't experience such things. And prior to that, the 3-year COVID period was very stressful for most of us. And as an artist, I feel we don't see new things, and that is not so, it doesn't help with our creativity. And I needed that residency. So you were talking about the ethnobotanical and ethno-ecological part of the practice. So what happened was, during my residency in Rimbundahan, I was exposed to their Southeast Asian botanical garden and their collection of plants and trees. And that made me realize, why am I not, educating myself, while I was in Singapore, to be knowledgeable about the kind of plants that is part of our traditional healing. And prior to that, I was also looking into, ways of healing that is more spiritual in that sense. And because I was also interested in this idea of spirituality, since it's been almost, I think, more than 10 years, I've been interested in understanding spirituality, not only in the faith that I've been raised, but also, the secular ways of practicing this. So the healing part is also what shape identities, I feel. And that subject matter is also included into my batik practice. So batik itself is also spiritual in some ways. So, okay, what else? Okay, the ethno-ecological part came about when I was in Manila itself, in the Philippines itself, with the experience of pilgrimage and all that, which I will go through in the slides. I think I'm talking too much without going. Okay, how do I? So that's me. So yes, that explains what started this research project on healing and traditions. And why traditions is being a batik artist in Singapore, in a country that is hyper-developed, and development is still going on, and how do I, put myself in this, place, and how do I fit in when people are, racing, and batik is such a slow process. It's a slow practice, and yeah. So yes, I speak about the sojourn. So I went to North Thailand in the mid-2023. And I went overland actually. So this is just part of my healing process efforts. And I took the train from Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai, and then all the way down to Singapore. So I took about a month just to, heal myself. It's like a, I don't know, midlife crisis, I guess.
Not yet.
Not yet. I'm 35, just
Rehearsing.
I'm 35 just a few days ago, but my midlife crisis started last year. So I guess this is an important part of my life as an artist and personal life as well. And I think this is, it is an important part. So this work that I'm showing is also the point of departure for the residency itself. Afterlife Reverse Rituals was presented in this exhibition, an exercise of meaning in glitch season that was in 2020. It was an exhibition that responds to COVID-19 and the pandemic. And I wanted to respond to the isolation that we experience, and how do we practice spirituality while in isolation. And we were not able to fly to places or even to move around within our own countries where we are based at. And this idea was taken out of that circumambulation movement. And the installation allows people to move around and in some ways to perform that circumambulation, which is, circumambulation is the moving around on a sacred object. So I gathered that as one ways of healing, and including the words as well. So the words was a reflection of how I see life and death in both religious and secular worldviews. So yeah, that was the point of departure for this work. So we are just going back. This is the culmination of the residency that I did in the M, the museum that I was in. So this work was formally untitled, but why untitled? I wanted it to be, to have new iterations in the future, so it won't be just this form. This two very colorful fabrics will become something else in different format, different colors. So I will be adding on more to this later on. And some of the words that were here, I'll just get my notes. Okay, the words on this, the green one, okay, let me see what's the words. So I'll just read out the words. So the title of this work is, now I just recently titled it, A Cry for the Amnesiac. This is a cry for the burnout self, for the tormented cities that never stops developing, expanding, and for the dream of a better society. How do you heal identities? How do you heal historical and cultural amnesia? How do you cure plant blindness? how do you cure forest phobia? And I wrote words like ancestral memories, native imagination, natural knowledge, and mystical courage. Just words that I actually found while I was in the Philippines. I think it's it's new thing for me. So the one on the other side, so the words are traditional practices, traditional healing, traditional livelihoods, traditional folkways, traditional knowledge, ways of healing, spiritual healing, physical healing, psychological healing, and social healing. And the title of this work is Ways of Healing. And why I picked the motive itself is a recurring theme of the Pucuk Rebong motif, or the mountain. Sorry, Pucuk Rebong is bamboo shoots, but it also means mountains. So the part where in the middle part here is the traditional Pucuk Rebong motif. It's always repeated, and also because mountain is sacred in this region. But when I was there, I made a bigger mountain than just one. So that somewhat simplified the patterns that has been recurring in my work. And over here, this part is another motif that was out of the Afterlife Reverse Ritual Works, the first one, this one. So the top view of this work is, it's not touching, it's almost circular. The view from the top is such that people can walk around. It's very sphere looking, but yeah. So yes, that was the combination of the work. Sorry, I'm going backwards because we are trying to find a flow of this conversation. So while in Manila, I found this vendors selling various herbs, plants, dried things. Some are, I think, stones, amulets, anting-anting. What else? What other words is there? Talismans, yeah. And they all function differently. The use for different purposes, for illness especially. I was not sick at that time. I did not have an illness. I was just burnt out. But I think it is still necessary for me to find out, what other ways what other ways of healing is not invasive. Pharmacology might be invasive. Medical medicine that is modern might be invasive, but how do we balance that? So this is one of the ways that I was looking into. How do we heal ourselves in such a way that also support our health? So while looking into plants, ethnobotanical interests and links, I found this plant, which is the sampagita. Sampagita is a national flower of the Philippines, and it's basically jasmine. And jasmine is very much used in this region. In Singapore, there are practices of using jasmine as well. There used to be practice in Malay culture, but not so much anymore. It's not something that we do that a lot these days. But there is still a practice in Manila, which I thought, this is so interesting. And why use sampagita, a flower that is declared by the Spanish colonials as a national flower, that is also, I feel like a long history that we need to look into, excavate, and the reason that these plants are still being used as part of spiritual practices. They are put on nooks and shoulders and wings of the saints as adornment and garland, as a blessing. So I thought that was interesting. And initially I wanted to use this plant as part of my installation at the M. But I thought, if I were to use this, then I am simply perpetuating imperialism as a foreigner. So how do I, we are all going through this process of decolonization. How do we help, have that realization that this decolonization process is still an ongoing conversation that we all have. And me as a foreigner coming into the Philippines, I do feel, I have to be careful with the things that I choose as part of my art making, and yeah. So this is the sampaguita that has been decayed and wilted, and I left this for, I think, almost a week. Why I wanted it to sort of preserve is because I was also interested in archives, like living archives, and yeah, I was thinking to preserve this, but I did not know how initially, and until I found out, okay, one way to preserve is to let this plant dry up, put newspaper or tissue and sandwich this and just let it dry for a few days. But yeah, this is just one of the experimentation. And also, the sampaguita is also used outside of Manila. This is in Quezon province, in the church called National Shrine of Our Lady of Sorrows. This is slightly different sampaguita. I think there's a mix of other flowers as well. So, okay, I'll just play this. So, this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah.
So you're in a tricycle.
Yeah, I was in a tricycle. They call it trike. Yeah, trike. And also in jeepneys, you find sampaguitas being hanged on hooks and nooks. It is, is in some ways a blessing for the trip. And the sampaguita here is somewhat dried, but it is still being used.
I think it's an interesting choice of, that you got interested in as sampaguita, especially if your practice intersects between that axis of secularity and spirituality. Because the jasmine, I think this one is ilang-ilang, so there are variations to that, but sweet-smelling white flowers particularly, they function in very everyday, it's a everyday mundane almost iconography and part of the scene, it's part of the scene, so there's something popular and kind of an automated use, but at the same time they also traverse into spaces of, if we call sacredness, or even in churches. Yeah.
So I'll go to next. Okay, so now the one of the pilgrimages. It's just one pilgrimage. The rest are sojourn. So I went to Mount Banahaw, which is in Quezon province. So the flower here was in Quezon, and yeah, I was there for a few days, and this is the day one of the trip to Mount Banahaw. There was no pilgrimage here, but I wanted to look into the biodiversity that was there in the mountain itself, and just understanding like what is going on in terms of environmental sustainability and protecting the natural area. So I wanted to learn about that more. And the botanical garden here is not accessible yet to the public, so the museum helped me with engaging with the authorities, and I was accompanied with the foresters and the rangers into this botanical garden. And the photo on the right is the Mount Banahao itself. So I was told that why there are clouds is because the mountain knows that there's a foreigner and a bit shy.
We do have that.
So, yeah.
Yes.
And I feel like it is true. And I was there for 3 days. The clouds are still there. They are not moving.
I think it's quite a common, you can call it folk, right? Like folklore too. In my province, we have the Mount Mayon, so it's quite similar.
Yeah.
So if they don't like you or something, or at least there's a certain kind of veiling around that, which contributes as well to the whole mythification of Mount Banahao. So Mount Banahao is, Quezon province, if I can keep talking about it. And historically, it's always been called a holy mountain. So there are different iterations of, maybe we can call it loosely like folk Catholicism, all about, and then there's something about the springs in there that is believed to be holy. So there are many sorts of pilgrimages that are not fixed on certain faith or belief systems in the Philippines, and you go to Mount Banahao for that. So there's a certain mysticism around it. But this whole veiling aspect, historically also with Mount Banahao, it's also an NPA, New People's Army, space. Like there's a base camp, so it's a paramilitary group and organization. So Mount Banahao was quite specific, especially in the 70s to 80s, 70s, 90s, as a base camp for this. So there's also this intersections between, certain insurgencies, but also the unattainable kind of spiritual fulfillment too. So maybe what I'm trying to say is there are different sorts of pilgrimages that happen at Mount Banahao. There's always the joke, especially the 80s. Okay, maybe my dad's generation, the communist spiritualists, right? Like Mount Banahao was a very significant site for the generation, and that's great that you had access to this, and I guess you will also show us what things that you've seen here.
Yeah. So thanks for that. I think that helps with a bit of history about Mount Banahao. I was there mostly for the experience and again the healing practices that just to have that experience is something that we don't have much in Singapore. I feel this is just a personal knowledge, I guess. So when I was there and being exposed to this, and of course there's no mountain in Singapore, and we can't do that. Bukit Timah, it's a bit of a hike. So actually this is one of the first few hikes in my life. Being able to hike Mount Banahao itself is a test of faith. And then bathing under this waterfall. So the waterfall on the left, where the rock is, I actually had to hug the rock. So one of the cleanses is to cleanse the body, and then the other one is to cleanse the mind, and cleanse the soul. And it is to balance the male and female energy as well. one of it is called, what is it called? Okay, I lost that word. Okay, I lost it, sorry. So I think this is, it's so eye-opening for me. It's the practice of animism is still around, very much practiced. There are still in Singapore, just that it's somewhat invisible, but this is quite spread out and quite well known that such practices do exist, and yeah. And one of the tests of faith is to enter the cave, and there's a few caves. So the caves that I went in, okay, this is a slightly better, not so claustrophobic cave. One of the caves that was part of the test was if you enter the cave and you exit at the other side, and if there are scratches on you, you still have sin.
So how was that?
So I didn't went into that cave because it's so claustrophobic, and I went to this cave instead. So this is more accessible to me. So I don't know if I have sin or not. But I don't need to know that. But it is an experience, I think. Something that, okay, we don't have caves in Singapore, obviously. Yeah, I guess. Okay, one of the pilgrimages sites is the Pamuestos. So over here, you light the candle and you make intentions to pray. And yeah, I did some of the quiet moments. It is very melancholy and, haunting, but yeah, it's so cool as well inside. And okay, one of the ending of the trip, of the pilgrimages, there are vendors selling all these amulets. They are sourced from Mount Banahao itself. And I have a few over here, which you can have a look later.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking about the Mount Banahao itself, so where I started first was Lukban and then Dolores. And this trip itself is what created the motive for the work that I showed earlier. So I almost circumambulate the mountain, but I did not make a full turn. Instead, I just made a half turn. And then, okay. And then, yeah, I felt that, this is one of the things that should be included in the motives or the archives into my work. So one of the reasons that I went to the Philippines, the research that I did over there is to look into the textile practices, traditional textile practices. And in the Philippines, the weaving textiles are big, and this is the one that I visited at Antique. And interestingly, the motifs that is over here, these are actually the Sampaguita's motif, which is patented for the Antique province. So the rest of the provinces are not allowed to use that motif.
It's just Antique.
Just Antique. But we have to, take note that the Sampaguita is Manila-centric as well. So, yeah. So while I was in Antique, and so the residency being a self-directed residency, I was allowed to, make trips outside of Manila often, and I chose to actually fly to Panay Island to visit Viva ExCon. It's a artist-led biennale that has been around since, I think, 1990s.
Yeah.
So it has been around for about 30 years. So this is the 33rd year where they invite the people of the artists in the Visayas region. And I think this is the first time that the Biennale was run in the rural area of Antique, because initially it was mostly in urban spaces, urbanized cities around the Visayas island. And I thought this is an interesting time because I was more aware of indigenous conversations, inclusion of indigenous people and artists into the art scene as well. And one of the conference, they talk about how do we include them into the local art scene and the regional one. And there were events and performance by various groups all over the world that was invited for this event. So some of the exhibitions that were part of the Viva XCon event was this one is a collaboration between the Vietnamese collective with one of the group in Antique, the blacksmiths communities. And I thought that was an interesting time because they had a residency over there for 1 month and they engaged with the locals over there. Although there was a barrier in terms of language, and they don't speak Tagalog, they speak Kinaraya. And I thought that was an interesting way to connect with the locals, rather than just be inviting artists that are well known or established into a biennale, an artist-run biennale, but not engaging enough with the locals. So I thought this was a really important time for me to understand that collaborations should happen. And this one is an installation of abaca plant. Abaca is one of the banana plants that's being used as fabric or textiles. So the blacksmith group that I visited while in Antique, and also, this is the traditional ways of making pottery. So, rather than using a kiln, the traditional way of firing the pottery is using a husk to fire it up. And I was invited to one of the community cooking with the locals and the organizer of the Viva XCon. And it's so nice to be part of that cooking session and also the celebration after the event. And a Filipino event is not complete without karaoke. So we had a karaoke session as well, and I sang Pangako Sayo, but it's a Tagalog. So that was a memorable time.
I think Viva XCon, where it's held Visayas, if I can give a bit of context, have quite an interesting. Maybe this is our entry point if we think about a different framework or language of regionality, because so Luzon is up in the north, and then Visayas is what we call the central bit. And Antique, where it's held, it faces the Sulu Sea to the west, so this is West Visayas. And Viva XCon, the context of this Biennale was a region or an island basically volunteers themselves to be the host for every biennale, but they're artist-led, they're artist groups. So for this round, it was Antique, right? Yeah. But they often always have a certain groundedness to the communities, and hence also their participating artists and the people involved in creating the work, and also having these festivities are very localized.
Okay, so the final slide here. While I was in Panay Island, where the Visayas is, I was invited to a exhibition, a prison art exhibition by it's run by the Super Indai project, led by Rosalie Zerudo, to support the women deprived of liberty in Iloilo prison. So I couldn't take photo out of respect for their request not to take any photos. So that is actually, in fact, my first time in the prison to see that these are the group of artists that are willing to support women who are, how do you say, women who need support, who need, they are invisible, they are not in our eyes every day, but they are as important as, and they're human as well. And I felt that, okay, this is one of the ways that we could heal as a society, is community healing. So I guess that was an important part. Besides looking into just traditional healing and individual healing, we should heal as a society as well. Yeah. So yeah.
Perhaps as a prompt, we talk about certain familiar experience, or certain spaces and experiences that felt familiar to you when you were going around these places. What, I guess, in a way stood out? Of course, you were bounded by an itinerary that looked at different textile practices and organizations, and also perhaps craft, the conversation about craft and what constitutes as craft, and also how does this verge into materials for a certain artistic practice. Like, was, for instance, your viewing of Viva Excon gave you a different perspective, or was that familiar to you?
Questions on craft.
Was it distinct? It felt distinct? Were they interwoven?
I mean, speaking about textile craft, the batik that I have been doing is not, how do you say, it is a slightly a different level compared to the weaving methods. I have no idea how, it's such a difficult process, weaving. It's also very calculative, right? And yeah, I think that is something that I still cannot grasp with weaving, but I guess the word weaving itself is so embedded in the Filipino culture that it also is part of their daily lives in interconnecting with one another. And so I guess that is how I understand their craft, and being able to be still practicing the craft, even in the age where we are, very fast-paced. But there is still some slowness while in the rural areas. I mean, compared to practicing craft in Manila or Singapore, they are there's a demand, the demand is that, okay, I need to complete this work at a certain time, at a certain period. There's a deadline. But I guess while in rural areas, I felt like, things are much slower paced, and there's a capacity that you can explore the craft in such ways that you're not able to do it while you are in cities. So I think being a craftsperson, artist, craftsperson, they are all, I think, in the end, we are the same. We all do the same things, just different names that we call ourselves. Why am I artist in a city, but why am I not an artist in a rural? All these are like words that we form. But I think at the end of the day, why I still do craft is to pay homage to the people who are still doing this, still able to be practicing traditional practices, blacksmithing, traditional ways of pottery making, what else? Traditional weaving. Yep.
I wonder if anybody at the audience would like to make a comment or follow up further with Fajrina's different points that she's mentioned in her presentation.
Hi, Fajrina. I'm very much struck by when you mentioned about communal healing, because that's also something that I'm looking into as well. Not so much on healing practices, or more or less it is, but from my standpoint is that I'm very much interested in storytelling, storytelling myths and folk tales within the region itself. And within the region itself, there is this concept of storytelling as a form of healing, and it's a very communal kind of approach. The Malay term for storyteller is penglipulara, literally the soother or dispeller of pain or anguish. And you have these rituals or these storytelling healing rituals among the Ibans as well as among the Javanese, and then in the Malay Peninsula you have Main Puteri as well as Mak Ayom. And yeah, I think that's also something that we can explore in looking at communal healing, that where we tend to focus on healing as the individual, but within these communities or within the region itself, there has been this concept of communal healing. I was wondering whether you do see that practice in the Philippines while you were there in your stay, of practice or even anecdotes of rituals involving communal healing itself. Yeah.
I think perhaps the Panay Bukit Non people, they did a bit of performance as an opening for the Viva ExCon Biennale. I guess that is part of their, well, it is an invitation to open the event. It is also healing, I guess, performance healing. Interestingly, the Panay Bukit Non people are descended from Malay migrants from the Indonesia and Borneo, which I thought, yeah, that is the part of migration that we don't talk much about in Singapore. So I guess that is part of the storytelling as performance healing. Yeah, I guess that is one of it. I'm not sure if there are others.
I think I remember we were talking about Darangin, so that's further down in Mindanao, where that has been now called I think it's there's a cultural heritage stamp on this now, but Darangin is actually a long epic sang and danced, but only by very specific priests and priestesses. So that's the Babaylan bit. So there is also moments of these kind of storytelling epics or expressions of them that come up in several ways as ceremonial, as part of opening ceremonies, but also situated in a very sacred temporality or time, right? So I was just thinking about it in those terms, the embeddedness of this sort of practices that is not exactly, not just like inaccessible, but it is part and imbricated into, into everyday life, but may be expressed more with bigger events like maybe a biennale or a big procession or very specific calendar, a specific time. Yeah. Just make me think about, it makes me think about that. Like if it's very specific to let's say a traditional epic in that kind of conventional storytelling sense, it does also go through that. There are specific communities that look through it.
It reminded me of a few works that I saw while in Viva XCon. There are works that are on textiles, and they are also talking about epics. I can't remember which one, but those works are weaved works and large-scale textile works. I think when we realize that storytelling is essential as part of our craft making and part of our life, then it is also healing that we share this as an artwork. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Fajrina, for sharing with us your travels, sojourn and pilgrimage, and Sid for taking us through also some, bring us to some points that are, I think, interesting to think about. I was actually thinking in my mind about art and craft, and because a lot of the times, that what you showed there were artisans, crafts people, and then Hafiz, your point about something that is communal, and trying to connect cultural practices in the region, because it's across Nusantara, right? And I'm wondering whether a lot of the times when we think about what is art and what is craft, is also, there's a parallel about the artist as an individual and craft and artisanal work as communal. So in terms of the process, it's not that it does not have any aesthetic value, whether it is the weaving, batik, pottery, or boats, right? And I mean, in the prep room, because that whole process, material culture in Nusantara is never about one person. It's a very social sort of a process. Communal also because in that process you require rituals that becomes part of the making of that work or craft. So I'm just thinking along those lines, because I'm so intrigued by all those images, and then seeing also that it's very communal. Mm-hmm. And whether then for us to think, that an aspect of what is seen to be art and craft is, or the difference has got to do with that. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you for running us through that, Prof. Su. And I think this is a conversation that we've been having about social history of things that are in a way maybe unauthored by one person, and how we deal with the material culture that we call in the museum as artifacts, right? But we think about even the making of this, talking about boats, and even thinking about making houses in the region too. There are certain, the ritualization of this sociality of these spaces and things are embedded in the making of what we can call art objects or something else. Do you think about that too?
I think when we talk about craft as part of the social experience, I was intrigued by one of the things that I saw while in Manila, especially, where the architecture of houses, the old houses, they use the bamboos as how do you say, as window structures.
Right.
So I can't remember what's the name.
It's the ventilation. It's what they
Yes.
open up, right?
Yeah, I think
They're shutters
the shutters, I guess.
also.
That has that is actually like embodied knowledge that is being passed down from generations that is before us, and so thanks to that knowledge of having this bamboo window structure, that it allows ventilation to come in. It allows ventilation to circulate inside the house, and because we live in a tropical region, this knowledge is something, a knowledge that is so important. But in the modern society, we don't do that anymore, because our houses are so concrete. So we don't have that bamboo structures anymore. I think part of this residency experience, being exposed to traditional methods of architecture or art or craft, it's the question that I ask myself always while I'm here and being in Singapore is, how do we still practice these things? How do we include the community, but also not to a point where we do art for, just for fun, but these are functional things. Yeah, it's a question that I ask myself every time. Thank you.
We have a bit of time to be with Fajrina if you'd like to meet with her and talk a bit more about other things, but she will also run us through, if you're interested, a bit later on. She brought some things that she has collected and picked up from her residency in the Philippines, and we're also serving food. Is the food already here? So we have refreshments outside. Please do have them outside. And the museum is open until 4:30. You could see all 3 floors. The Hollander Rig, the exhibition with the boat models there on the 2nd floor, concourse level. Yes, but we'll be around. We could just disperse the room and have it more casual. And if you have time, it would help us deeply if you can fill up a feedback form for this talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll just be here. There are some things that I brought from the Philippines. These are my sort of archives. There are fabrics, there are bones, there are archives from Mount Banahao itself, and some artists' works that was given to me, and some books as well. So feel free to just come over here and look through and have a chat with me. Thank you so much.